We'll start with an introduction by our Behavioral Health Administration Assistant Secretary, Kevin Bovenkamp.
Good evening, all, and thanks for joining us to talk a little bit about our master plan update and some of the information we have to share with you. I'm excited to be able to present this evening. First of all, as a part of the state's vision for behavioral health transformation, there's a statewide plan, and obviously Western State Hospital plays a large role in that plan. A part of that vision is moving away from a centralized large hospital system. And Western State has certainly been sort of the cornerstone of that system for many, many years, having just served its 150th year anniversary there in the community. In doing so, we're going to convert some state hospitals into forensic only facilities. And so some of what you'll hear this evening, we'll be discussing a new hospital that we're planning to construct in the coming years. That will be dedicated to serving forensic patients. And with civil patients, one of the options and features we like is this gives us an opportunity to build smaller treatment facilities in the community to handle our civil patients, which allows us to treat people closer to their home communities, keeping intact those support networks and making it easier on families and others to maintain contact with the individuals we're serving in a civil capacity. We also believe that focusing our state hospitals on forensic patients there at Western will help us serve those patients better and improve the level of care there. With that, I'll turn it back over to Susie.
Thank you, Kevin. Now I'll have Mark Thompson, Western's Chief Executive Officer for the Forensic Center of Excellence, who will explain our vision for a Forensic Center of Excellence.
Thanks, Susie. As Susie mentioned, my name is Mark Thompson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Gage Center of Forensic Excellence at Western State Hospital. And for the Gage Center at Western State Hospital, and Kevin mentioned this, I believe, our component of the behavioral health transformation is to continue to provide and expand upon the treatment services related to competency evaluation, competency restoration, and therapeutic interventions for those currently deemed not guilty by reason of insanity. To that end, we're focused on taking the strong foundation of forensic treatment services that have been provided at the hospital for decades and moving that treatment into the future. In order to move that treatment into the future, we will be hearing more details in a few minutes about the master plan for the hospital. One of the key components of that plan will be the construction of a brand new state-of-the-art hospital building on the grounds of Western State Hospital that will expand our capacity to provide competency evaluation and competency restoration services. This new therapeutic environment will serve the dual purpose of creating an atmosphere that is conducive to patients receiving evidence-based and proven treatment interventions, and doing so in an environment that supports safety for both patients and the staff who work with those patients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As we move into the future, we will also continue and expand upon our partnerships with academic institutions to support research and innovation that will firmly establish the Gage Center as a forensic center of excellence.
Thank you, Mark. I noticed we had a raised hand. We're using our Q&A function for all questions tonight. So if you have a question, please enter it there and we will get to it at the end of the presentation. Thank you. And now we have Bob Hubenthal with Capital Projects to explain our master plan process and master plan details.
And I believe Bob may be muted.
I'll try again. I'm Bob Hubenthal, staff architect for WSH and the director of our Office of Capital Programs. In that position, my staff and I are responsible for all design and construction projects at all WSH owned properties, including our campus in Lakewood. The master plan is a conceptual illustration and an analysis of what the campus might develop in a 10-year period. It looks primarily at new construction, additions, and proposed demolition, and the infrastructure supports that are necessary for those projects, including utilities, transportation, parking, wayfinding, and other elements of the site. The master plan document itself runs about 47 pages, but is accompanied with an appendix that runs well over 600 pages, including a transportation impact analysis, property survey, patient discharge instructions, and an environmental checklist. The master plan is a requirement of the City of Lakewood. Without an approved master plan or without projects on our approved master plan, the city will not issue building permits for that construction. Our current master plan dates back to 1996, and we have pretty well initiated and nearly completed all the projects that were included in that plan. We did a review of that plan in 2008, but it was never submitted to the city for approval. We recognize that we have a number of different programs operating on our 268-acre campus. We have an adult psychiatric hospital that cares for both civilly committed patients and forensic committed patients. We have a community forensic treatment program in the far southwest corner of our campus. The Child Study and Treatment Center, and on the center easterly side of our campus, provides care and treatment for children aged 6 to 18. Our campus also includes historic Fort Steilacoom, managed by the Historic Fort Steilacoom Association. And in the open space, we have activities related to Pierce County Disc Golf Association. And we have open space on the northern edges of our campus. Also on our campus, but not included in the master plan, is the community facility operated by the Division of Children, Youth, and Families in the far southeast corner, and the West Pierce Fire and Rescue Department, also located along the eastern edge of our campus. Our goals with this master plan and the proposed projects is to transform the hospital's model of care for our civil and forensic staff, to improve campus efficiencies by zoning by program area, modernizing our campus infrastructure, and improving site access and wayfinding. The master plan includes a number of key features. Next slide, please. The highlighted area here is that area in the southwest corner of the campus where we will design and construct our new 350-bed forensic hospital. Our lines are still a little squiggly at this point because what is illustrated here is an early concept. As we are just now entering into the design phase, we expect that this will evolve some and could move around a bit within that defined circle. Let's jump to the next slide. This shows some of that early concept planning. We looked at a number of different possibilities for siting the new hospital on the Western State Hospital campus as directed by the legislature. And so those first 6 sketches showed different locations on the west side of campus, on the east side of campus. I think there's even one there in the bottom left-hand corner that looked at the feasibility of constructing it on the golf course. The other 2 were options where we looked at locating it someplace else, off-site, in a non-specific location, but we explored those options simply to see what would that do to our siting and our timing and our costs to not only be required to build a new hospital, but all the supporting facilities that go with that, including dietary services and pharmacy and maintenance and transportation. Next slide. Other projects that are included in our 10-year plan include a treatment and recovery center located on our East Campus. Those are the two buildings located on the north central side. This program converts 2 wards into treatment space and adds a small gymnasium. We're also proposing, as you can see in the circled area of the diagram, a 18-bed residential cottage, similar to what we just constructed at the Child Study and Treatment Center. Item G on that sketch is a new activity and visitation center for the Child Study and Treatment Center. The master plan also includes, in the very bottom left-hand corner of that sketch, a possibility of a 48-bed civil community residential treatment facility. That is part of this statewide transition to provide treatment in community settings. DSHS is not recommending this location. There are other communities and other sites that could be developed, but we have included it in the master plan just in case we're directed to do so. And also in our plan is a new visitor center for Fort Silicon Historical Association, located just southeast of their parade grounds. The included in our goals in our master plan are both the new construction and the proposed demolition. Overall, we build slightly more than we demolish, but many of those buildings that remain behind will be much less densely populated as patients move out and staff move elsewhere on the campus. The next steps in the master plan process is for us to respond to a couple of additional questions raised by the city, for the city staff to complete their review and make a recommendation to the hearing examiner, and then a public hearing with the hearing examiner to make a decision on the master plan application. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we have Janice Gogan, our Director of Community Transitions, who will talk about our patients and treatment programs.
Hi, thank you very much for attending and participating in our information session today. We have 2 types of forensic patients at the state hospitals. The first type that I'm going to address are competency evaluation and restoration patients. I'm going to try to address a couple of the questions in the comments and in our Q&A that were asked about these issues as well. So individuals enter our forensic services through the criminal court system. If it appears that due to a mental illness that they may not be competent to participate in their court process, which would mean that they don't really understand the roles of the different people within the court process, the different pleas that they may have, and the ability to participate and advocate for themselves, then the court may order the evaluation to see if they're competent. And then after that evaluation's completed, they may order for competency restoration treatment. Treatment, and I do want to say that is the difference between incorporation and a treatment facility, is that our primary purpose is to do evaluation and treatment in these settings. So treatment looks like education about the court system, medication management and stabilization, mental health education. They learn coping skills, and they get to go to other treatment groups. And this could be medication or treatment about their mental health, could include learning about their medications, what the benefits are, how to manage the side effects. So once competency evaluation and restoration is complete, the person would return to jail in order to finish their court process. And I did see some questions about whether we have anything to do with the person at that point. And so once we've completed competency evaluation and restoration, then the jail retains custody of that person, and they go through the jail system. And different jails have different levels of services available with them. So it would vary from area to area. Next slide, please, Susie. One thing that may happen if someone is decided to be competent to participate in their court process is that they could enter a plea of not by reason of insanity. Again, they've entered the system through the court system, and they would receive a sentence of inpatient services or a commitment to inpatient services. What treatment looks like is a little bit different. You still have your medication management and stabilization. You have individual and group therapy and mental health education. And the idea here is to stabilize the underlying mental health condition that led to the index offense or the initial offense. For these patients, we would do discharge planning. It requires a court order to be conditionally released to the community. We discharge plan with a group of people that can include the DOC specially trained community corrections officers, behavioral health agencies, the treatment team at the hospital, the patient, and we develop a wraparound support plan that includes ensuring they can continue their medications, receive case management, therapy, medical care. And then the transition teams, including the state hospital, the CCO, and the behavioral health agency, if those are court appointed, continue to support the patients post-discharge. All right, back to you, Susie.
Thank you. Now we'll have Mark Thompson speak about safety and security and what's next.
Thanks, Susie. So one of the most critical components of designing a new forensic hospital is the dedication to patient safety, staff safety, and the safety of the surrounding community. The new 350-bed hospital is being designed to provide competency evaluation and competency restoration services to patients committed to Western State Hospital through the court system. As such, the building will be designed to be a fully locked and secure facility that will also have the goal of providing as therapeutic an environment as possible. Utilizing interior courtyards for outdoor spaces rather than large yards with fences is one such way this design will attempt to meet both of the goals of security and therapeutic efficacy. In the new hospital, the entrances and exits will all be under staff control, and points of entry will be limited to assure that access is secure. And much like today, all staff will continue to receive extensive training in patient de-escalation, therapeutic modalities, and emergency response techniques. And as is currently the case today, our strong relationship with local law enforcement will continue into the future when needing to partner on issues related to safety and security. So that leads us to what's next. So we are currently in the process of seeking approval from the City of Lakewood for our master plan. This evening's meeting supports this process, and we are glad to have the opportunity to interface with the community and discuss the components of the master plan and the vision of the state of Washington for the future. The design of the 350-bed hospital is currently in the process of launching, with hospital construction slated for completion sometime in the biennium of 2027 to 2029. Susie, turn it back over to you.
Thank you. We hope this briefing gave you a better understanding of our master plan, our patients, and our programs. Before we open up to questions, I'd like to point out that after the town hall, you can find more information at our website, which is listed here. And if you have additional questions later on, you can also email us at bhacommunications@dshs.wa.gov. And it looks like we have quite a few questions, so we will start answering those. The first question I see says there are significant problems with smaller community treatment centers for developmentally disabled people. See Shut Them Down campaign. Why would these community treatment centers be any better? And Janice, I believe you can answer this one.
I can, thank you, Susie. So in looking at the document that was provided, these are in reference to DDA's residential habilitation centers, which are large facilities. And so compared to the community treatment centers that we're developing with BHA, which are 16-bed units, 16 to 48 bed units, and will be providing evidence-based care for behavioral health, they're not similar to a DDA residential habilitation center, probably in very many ways, as psychiatric treatment is different than habilitation as well.
Thank you. I think our next question is probably in your lane as well, Janice. It says, what happens to patients, incarcerated people, after their competency has been restored? Do you continue to provide treatment? Do you come up with a treatment plan? Are services available in prisons that continue this treatment? And what if people are released to the street?
Okay. As I mentioned, if their competency is restored, they return to the custody of the jail, and we do not continue to provide treatment. We only have legal authority to provide the competency evaluation and the competency restoration treatment. We do not develop a treatment plan. But the jails often have mental health services of some kind, and they would be connected to whatever resources that the mental health department of the jail, which we have no control over as part of the criminal justice system, is able to provide for them.
Thank you. Bob, I think this next one is in your lane. Why have you not committed to a full EIS process for this project rather than merely a SEPA checklist? This project is significant and a full environmental impact statement must be completed to adequately understand the impacts to the community and environment.
So the master plan follows the processes and requirements of the city of Lakewood, which includes the SEPA checklist. The city of Lakewood has assumed lead responsibility for SEPA, and they will be the ones that determine whether or not an environmental impact statement will be required.
Thank you. Mark, I think our next question is for you. Forensic commitment is a process in which patients are funneled into forced hospitalization through the criminal legal system. Given that this system incarcerates Black people at 6 times the rate of white people in Washington, how are we to expect that more beds for forensic commitment won't result in more Black people held in what is essentially a prison?
Thanks, Susie. And I think I see 2 things in that question. The first one being forensic commitment. And really the purpose that Western State Hospital serves in this process is to take those individuals who have been referred from the courts to try to do our best to evaluate whether they have the competency to understand their charges, and then to restore them to a point where they are able to participate in their own defense. So we are trying to get patients to the point where they can advocate for themselves through the court process for the charges being brought against them. And as to the other portion of the question regarding the disproportionate perception of Blacks and people of color entering this system, really what we do at the hospital is we try to focus on our efforts toward equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we have our ADI administrator at the hospital who works with the staff. Staff undergo training on equity, diversity, and inclusion to assure that we are trying to come from a culturally diverse perspective when we are treating our patients, and we look at those things that really are important to a person's individuality when they come into the hospital, because obviously it's difficult in a forensic environment when many things are controlled for the patients to really try to meet those individual needs as well.
Thank you. So here's a question. I think this one could probably go to Janice. How will this project ensure that people are not separated from their communities, forensic as well as civil patients?
So with both our forensic and our civil patients that come to us for discharge planning, we always start with the community that they call home. And so it's a combination of and looking for the resources that they need in order to serve them best in their recovery. So for an example, if someone came to us with dementia and they needed a skilled nursing facility that treats dementia, we may have to refer them to a different county if that's where that service exists. Otherwise, the patient who is a resident of the state is welcome to ask to move to a new county. But for the most part, most of our patients return to the county that they lived in prior to being hospitalized. We also connect with families and support system, and as much as the patient allows for, and get them involved in treatment planning, discharge planning, helping understand the person's mental illness. We have family education groups. And so we do as much as we can to help keep people connected to their community.
Thank you. Our next question will be for Mark. After being stripped of millions of dollars of funding from Medicaid for failing to achieve basic health and safety standards, how are you going to sustain care with an expansion this significant?
I appreciate the question. And I think really what we try to do on a daily basis is, regardless of the funds that we're receiving from the federal government, the objective of my leadership team and the leadership team that oversees the Civil Center of Excellence is to meet all of our regulatory requirements, to meet the conditions of participation for CMS, and really to do our best to provide cutting edge treatment. So yes, the loss of the dollars from the federal government was a hit several years ago. But since that time, we have not ceased in our striving to meet those standards and exceed them. And so just because we've stopped receiving funds certainly has not detracted from the services and the level of intensive therapy that we are providing to our patients.
Thank you. Janice, this question is for you. We were told at the open house that patients do not receive forced medication. Is this true? What does consent mean or look like in this case?
So yes, we don't generally do, as I stated during the town hall, forced medications. It requires a separate court order to do so. And there are statutes that have to be followed. So just because someone is committed to competency restoration, that does not include the right for us to force medications. And so we try to be as collaborative with individuals as possible. They're involved in treatment planning from the moment they enter the hospital, and that includes being educated and discussing medication options. We really try to respect people's wishes, and usually when forced meds are ordered, it has a lot to do with for competency restoration, their ability to participate in that competency in the court processes and helping them get there. With an NGRI patient, it would be about the safety of the patient and others that could drive that to a court order.
Thank you. And I think Janice, these next couple of questions are for you as well. The next one is, what happens to someone who does not want to be medicated?
Usually it's working with them to see what the barriers are to that, because there can be a lot of different barriers. An example of that could be someone doesn't like the side effects of the medication that they were on last time. And so the doctor may be able to discuss different options with them. Someone could have a delusion that their medication is poison from, the government, or a satellite that they believe is poisoning them. And we can continue to work with them to build trust, educate them about medications, try to build that relationship that helps someone enter into recovery. It's a very relational process.
Thank you. And our next question is, so wraparound services only extend until they are released to jail?
So the wraparound services are not for the competency restoration patients returning to jail. So we were talking about that in the context of the NGRI patients transitioning back to the community. And it also applies for our civil patients. And the wraparound services, stay with them as long as they're willing to participate in them.
Thank you. I'm just looking at our next few questions here. And I'm going to ask this next one to you as well, Janice. How do you ensure that your treatment and involuntary commitment is not further contributing to someone's trauma?
That's a great question. Trauma-informed care is very important to all of the behavioral health administration and the leadership at the state hospitals and facilities. And we have taken many efforts to train our staff about trauma-informed care. And for those of you not familiar, trauma-informed care really looks at how all of us have experienced traumas, different traumas in our lives, regardless of whether that would lead to a full PTSD diagnosis, and understanding how interactions with one another can really trigger those. So I like to think of like an inpatient hospital where someone's being involuntarily held as you can see where there's going to be a power dynamic or power struggle that could lead to triggering trauma. And so we always want to be really respectful in how we approach the patient, especially when they're struggling, and not in a, you definitely don't want 5 large guys walking up to you when you're in the middle of a crisis. That might make you scared versus one friendly face who you trust. So teaching strategies like that to help minimize how we can trigger trauma is really important. We're dedicated to it, and we continue to move in that direction within BHA.
Thank you. One more for Janice. Have you all considered how you can offer behavioral health before people get wrapped up with the police criminal legal system?
I love this question as well. Thank you for asking it. So right now, the legislature is very interested in the ideas of all of the different agencies and administrations and stakeholders that are involved in the behavioral health system, from the community and through the state hospital system. And BHA gets to participate in those work groups and advocate for those resources for our clients. And I can tell you right now, a lot of the work that we're doing in work groups is about expanding the crisis system, ensuring adequate beds at earlier stages, ensuring adequate services at earlier stages in a crisis so that it's not ending up in a hospitalization, making sure that we have the appropriate wraparound care, identifying what gaps exist in our system for people that aren't able to access services, and how to have adequate services for them as well. So that's something we're really invested in, and that the state is invested in right now. So you should be seeing new ideas come out very shortly.
Thank you. This one is for Mark. Empirical evidence suggests that prioritizing people's autonomy is necessary for healing, and the treatment offered by Western State Hospital prioritizes eliminating patient autonomy. What is the true goal of the hospital, given that supporting disabled people is not that purpose?
Thanks, Susie, and I appreciate giving Janice a brief break so someone else can talk. I appreciate the question, and I think really that you're definitely correct that we always want to encourage autonomy in our patients. It is more of a challenge, and I think I mentioned this earlier with our folks who come in for competency evaluation and restoration. These are folks who come from the jail, they've been accused of a crime, and then they're supposed to stand trial. And really, for those people coming into the forensic side of the hospital, it is difficult because we're trying to get them back to a point where they have some autonomy, where they have the ability to interact with their attorney so that they can understand the charges that are being brought against them. So it is our goal to restore that autonomy through the competency restoration process. And it's our hope that we can get them back to that point so that they can go back to jail and then face the charges that are against them.
Thank you. Our next question is also for you. Has Western State Hospital gotten its federal certification and funding back after failing health and safety evaluation?
Western State Hospital is currently not certified by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, CMS, but that was something that I was referencing earlier, that even though we aren't receiving funding for it, we are currently meeting the conditions of participation for the program. We currently do not have certification or accreditation, but we are definitely providing the level of patient care that would be necessary to do so.
Thank you. Next question is also for you, Mark. Who are you actually providing security and safety to with this project?
I really think it's threefold. I think on the one hand, it is for the patients because we are trying to create with the new hospital construction a therapeutic milieu, an environment where there are more open spaces, where even though they're receiving their competency evaluation and restoration services, that they're doing so in an environment that does not feel prison-like. I think it is safer for our staff because there are controlled entrances and exits to the facility. There are fewer people coming in and out, people that shouldn't perhaps be there. And I also think it's safer for the community because of those locked access points, because the courtyards we're going to try to design internally inside of the building. So there is less of a chance of a potential for escape.
Thank you. Bob, this next one is for you. Speaking of the environmental review project, why did DSHS try to unilaterally declare that environmental review was not necessary in 2018?
So SEPA requirements, so the SEPA checklist is required of certain projects of a certain size. And when the SEPA checklist requirement kicks in, we comply. I don't know specifically what the reference to 2018 is about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Janice, if you can answer, how do you determine if someone has competency?
Certainly, to the extent that I'm aware. So we actually have trained psychologists who do the competency evaluations, and I am not a psychologist, so I am not trained in them, but they're looking at whether someone understands the court processes, they understand who all the parties and players are, they understand the different pleas, and can advocate on behalf of themselves. So I know those are components of that. They're going to take consideration someone's cognitive capacity. They may have developmental disabilities or a mental illness that are impacting their ability to understand the processes.
Thank you. Mark, there's a question that asks, how has feedback you've received from patients regarding the hospital's practices informed your decisions with treatment?
It absolutely influences treatment. I think between input that we receive from our staff, input that we receive from our patients, we're always willing to learn and grow in how we provide the best care we can to our patients. So on many of our wards, we have patient councils. So patients are involved, they advocate on behalf of one another, and patients have the ability with their treatment teams to advocate for themselves if they feel that the treatment they're receiving is something that is not beneficial.
Thank you. And Janice, we have a question on, do you see any tension between trauma-informed care and psychiatric incarceration?
I think anytime there's an involuntary part of a process, there's going to be some tension with the involuntary, but I see that as separate from trauma-informed care, because trauma-informed care can be ingrained in all the things that we do when we interact with other. And so you can still treat someone with compassion, understanding of their trauma. Your approach can be safe. Your approach can be compassionate. And to me, that is very different than taking actions that are traumatizing towards someone. So they're two very separate things, and you can always use trauma-informed care no matter what your setting and approach. In fact, I can use trauma-informed care if someone's yelling at me in a grocery store and I don't know them, and that whatever's underlying it may have trauma. So, and so I think that the next question as well, Susie, about how can trauma-informed care include psychiatric incarceration?
Yes, thank you. All right, we have a question for Kevin. How are you responding to the fact that many Lakewood representatives from the community and city council representatives don't want this to happen?
Thanks, Susie. Well, part of it is we were available to meet with community members recently in an in-person town hall forum we did with this. And so we got to meet with some of the representatives there. That aside, myself and CEO Thompson and others are always available to talk with city council members or representatives that would like to get in touch with us and discuss their concerns about the plan.
Thank you. I think those are the majority of the questions we have at this point. I was just going to see if we have any more questions that are coming in. I know, Bob, when we had some of the questions from Lakewood previously, some of the questions were more about how this is going to affect traffic, what the actual building will look like, how it'll affect disc golf. Can you answer those questions, please? You're muted, Bob.
Thank you. Let me take those one at a time if I can remember all three. Traffic impacts, certainly a construction project of the size of the new hospital or even the other projects that are included in the master plan will bring construction traffic to the vicinity. We've got a construction project underway right now that is adding 55 beds to the hospital approved under the previous master plan. And so people may be noticing the construction vehicles coming and going from the site on that. We will work with the city to identify the appropriate measures to mitigate that traffic. We'll be careful that as vehicles leave the site, that they are cleaned or broomed or washed down so that they're not carrying debris onto the city streets. The ultimate layout of the campus may move some of the entry points along Steilacoom Boulevard. And so again, we will coordinate with the city of Lakewood in their plans to improve Steilacoom Boulevard so that we are not contradicting what they're doing or we are not undoing what they install at a later time. The other question, Susie, was how big will it be? What will it look like? We will comply again with the city's requirements for setbacks, which is 75 feet from Steilacoom Boulevard and 100 feet from Sentinel Drive, there near the high school. That may bring our new construction a little bit closer to Steilacoom Boulevard than what it is today. The city allows us to go to 5 stories. We anticipate a new building of 3 stories. It just is easier to operate a 3-story hospital, and we're more likely to get daylight into the interior courtyards, which are an essential part of the design. Question about disc golf. We have offered disc golf has been an activity on the campus for a number of years. Until 2018, we leased the old Fort Steilacoom Golf Course to Pierce County, which had an arrangement with the Disc Golf Association for some play in campus areas. When the county terminated that lease in 2018, the disc golf continued. We have since seen a rezone of the properties on the north side of our campus. So the old golf course in the area immediately north of our gravel parking lot is zoned open space and recreation, while the area that is east of that and north of the Child Study and Treatment Center is still zoned public institution for campus operations. We have offered a 4-year lease to the Pierce County Disc Golf Association for the golf course lands and the land immediately north of the gravel parking lot, all of which is zoned open space and recreation. That then moves the disc golf activities off of the area that is immediately north of the Child Study and Treatment Center. But that area in the northeast corner of our campus remains open space. We have no planned development in that area, and so the public is still welcome to walk their dogs or view birds or recreate in that space passively if they choose to do so.
Thank you, Bob. We have another question for your Elaine. What is the price tag on the expansion and how might that grow over time?
Well, the construction price tag is $400 million. The overall price tag, as we've estimated it today, is just a bit over $600 million. That includes both the construction costs, design, permits, sales tax, contingencies, furniture and equipment, artwork, everything that's required to, the demolition is in there as well. Everything that's required to stand up a new 350-bed hospital and the associated administrative and support spaces that go with that new facility.
Thank you. Mark, our next question is for you. Why is Western collaborating with the local law enforcement when we know that cops cause trauma for people with disabilities?
Maybe I wasn't clear about that collaboration with law enforcement. Really what that is it is advocating on behalf of our staff. If they feel that they might have a safety concern, if we have a staff member that has been assaulted in the hospital by a patient, they always have the opportunity to interact with local law enforcement if they're seeking to press charges. And then we network with our local law enforcement when we're having discharges that are coming up for required notification. So I didn't mean to lead that into being that we were networking as far as getting training from police departments or local law enforcement, but we definitely are connected with them.
Thank you. And Bob, I think this next one will go to you. Will anyone be displaced from their homes as a result of this project?
I'm not sure how we're defining homes, but our impacts will, our construction will stay on our campus. It will not extend into the neighborhood surrounding Western State Hospital.
Thank you. And I think this next one can also go to you, but if not, maybe it's a Mark question. Do you anticipate increased number of overall staff after the completion of the traffic, and by how much?
I can take that. So our master plan did an extensive traffic analysis. It's by far the largest portion of our total document. It actually anticipates that even with the new hospital and the expansions at the Child Study Treatment Center and the potential expansion for additional civil beds in community care, that our overall staffing, our overall traffic will be reduced by about 5% over our baseline, which is recently.
Thank you. And I think this next one will be for Mark. There is over a 70% recidivism rate from the jails for folks coming from forensic hospitals. How are you accounting for this?
I think the way that we account for it is we just seek to provide the best evaluation and restoration services that we can. I think it's an inevitability when we're speaking about mental illness and those who interface with the criminal justice system, that there is a chance for recidivism. There is a chance for relapse. There is a chance for someone re-entering a system and requiring more treatment. So I think the way that we deal with it at Western State Hospital is that we treat the patient when they come to us. So we know that those patients are going to, from time to time, come back and visit us again for varying reasons. So I think that's really how we can control that inside the walls of the hospital, is to provide the best services that we can.
Thank you. Our next question, also from Mark. Will Western State Hospital still be called a hospital when it's only for forensic beds?
Yes, Western State Hospital, the forensic hospital and hospital in general, under state statute, we are able to have forensic and civil beds and be called a hospital.
Thank you. And I know that Janice spoke previously about some of the treatment that we offer to our NGRI and competency restoration patients. Janice, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I will add that competency restoration is an opportunity for someone to start their recovery. And so, yes, they entered through the criminal court system. We're giving them an opportunity to get started. They do usually have to finish their court system process. And we hope for the recovery to stick. Sometimes it takes multiple attempts for people to get in recovery. And I don't know about any of you, if you've tried to change anything in your life, weight loss is a good example. It can take multiple runs at it before it sticks. And so we all have our things to get through, and recovery is not a linear process. So our job is to work in collaboration with the court systems, but we do our part, which is treatment, focus on recovery, ensure that people have the best opportunity to be successful when they do return to the community.
Thank you. And Bob, I know we've received questions as well about the timeline of the project. Could you go into some more detail about that, please?
I can. So we operate on a biennial basis, which runs from July of odd numbered years to June of the following odd numbered year. In this 21-23 biennium, we received $51 million, which funds the design, demolition, and some interim measures that may be necessary to accommodate folks that are being displaced from buildings to be demolished. We expect that the earliest activity that we'll see on site will likely be in the spring of 2023. That would be the earliest that we would likely start any demolition activities. And that would continue through maybe the fall of 2023. We will go back in the 2023 legislative session in January and request the construction funding that's necessary to proceed with the contract. If the legislature appropriates the funding, we could be ready to actually see some major site work, utility development on the site as early as the fall of 2023. And with a construction timeline of about 4 years, that carries us out into the 2027 to 29 biennium.
Thank you, Bob. 2 more questions for you. The first one is asking about funding and how that process works with the legislature. I know it said that the construction will be complete between 2027 and 2029. Can you explain how that's related to funding?
Yes. So we cannot award a design or a construction contract if we don't have the full funding available to cover the full cost of that contract. And so we would be requesting in the next biennium in January of 23 for the full construction appropriation of about $550 million, which would allow us to proceed. Once that's funded, we would not be going back to the legislature for additional funding for this project, because we will have everything that we believe that we need for completion.
Thank you. And the next question for Bob, what kind of safeguards will be in place while you're doing construction should this plan go through?
Safeguards, again, I wonder again at that definition. Certainly the contractor is accountable to Labor and Industries for activities on the construction site. There will be adequate separation or fencing between construction activities and hospital activities, and public access will be limited in the construction site, as it would be in any construction site. Activity off campus will be minimal, other than the construction and construction worker vehicles that are coming in and out of the site. And if I may, let me follow up on the previous question about funding. It's worthwhile to note that the state has a couple of different budgets. It has the transportation budget, it has the capital budget, it has the operating budget. And those funds don't slide back and forth. And so most of the construction funding is funded by bonds issued by the state, specific for design and construction activities. If those funds were not appropriated for Western State Hospital, they would go to some other construction project somewhere else in the state. They don't slip over to the operating budget side in support of behavioral health services or community services for other purposes.
Thank you. And I think the second part of this question will go to Janice. It asks, where do current clients go, and are there additional requirements for the construction crews? Maybe that's also for Bob.
That last part will be for Bob, but I can tell you where the current clients go. Right now, we're working on transitioning the civil patients into where they'll start their commitment in the community in long-term civil beds. What we're doing at the hospital is we are working on discharging patients back to the community, ensuring that they have really great wraparound plans, where they're set up for recovery. And as we need to close wards down, we stop filling the beds behind them. So we're not looking at having to transfer people in the middle of their commitment to another hospital for the most part. Right now, the plans are to discharge to the community and have people enter the new system. And I'll hand it to Bob about the construction crew, because I could make up some requirements, but they'd be not right. So
additional requirements for the construction crews. Of course, labor and industries and other agencies are responsible for on-site safety. DSHS runs a background check on every potential crew member and eliminates those from working on site that have felony backgrounds or other crimes that that the secretary has excluded. Currently, as of October 18th, all of our contractor workers on site are required to be fully vaccinated. We'll see how long that continues into this construction project, but we do have measures in place that assure the safety of the construction workers, as well as our folks on staff and the general public.
Thank you, Bob. I know we spoke about it a little bit before, but can you go into greater detail about the next steps of this project?
So let me answer that in two ways. The master plan is this project. And so we will respond to a couple of recent questions submitted by the city of Lakewood so that they have a complete package that they can review and make their recommendations upon. There will be a public hearing sponsored by the city, where the city staff will issue a report and likely make a recommendation. The hearing examiner will have an opportunity to receive public testimony. DSHS will have an opportunity to speak for the application, and the hearing examiner will make a decision, which may or may not have conditions attached to it. Once we have the master plan approval, we've got projects on site that will be ready to proceed, projects other than the new hospital. I mentioned the treatment and recovery center at buildings 28 and 29. That project will be waiting for a building permit, waiting for the master plan for a building permit, can proceed. We will continue for the next year and a half in our design efforts to put the detail to the plans, working with a number of hospital staff and behavioral health administration staff, our architects and their sub-consultants to put a package together. We will be preparing next summer our capital budget request that will go to the legislature in January 2023. We'll go to the governor in November, and to the legislature, we hope in January of 23 for funding. As I'd mentioned, we may see some construction activity for demolition as early as 23, construction following later in 23. We need to talk further with the city of Lakewood about their schedule for planned improvements to Steilacoom Boulevard, so that we can coordinate that. And we may need to move up a little bit earlier some of the access point work that we had anticipated as part of our project, depending upon what the city schedule is.
Thank you very much. And that's all we have for right now. We thank everybody for joining us for this evening's town hall. We will make sure that the recording is posted to our public website for Western State Hospital. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments, feel free to email us at bhacommunications@dshs.wa.gov. Thank you.